Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today is Tennessee 6th District Congressman John Rose. We're talking about all the things going on in Washington these days. It's a very busy month of September and a contentious one. Congressman, a couple other questions about the infrastructure bill. There's a smaller one that's only about $1 trillion, if $1 trillion is a small number. It's mostly bricks and mortar projects. I think some of your colleagues in the Senate voted for it. It actually passed on a bipartisan basis there. Given the kind of things it's going to fund and what the needs in the country, are you likely to at least think about voting for this when it comes to the House floor?
Well, Pat, I certainly support investment in infrastructure, as I've proven historically with my votes and with my advocacy. Heaven knows, as you travel across Tennessee, we see the needs for infrastructure investment in our communities, roads and bridges. And I even favor a broader definition of infrastructure, including things like water investment in our waterways, investment in water treatment facilities, investments in broadband. And so the $1.2 trillion bill that you mentioned kind of has two parts to it. One is a reauthorization of the Federal Highway Trust Fund, which has been in place for many years, is the motor fuel tax that is then used to fund investments in traditional ground transportation and airports and that sort of thing. And then in addition to that, a little over $500 billion in new spending that would go toward a mix of different infrastructure investments. Unfortunately, only a small portion of that additional money would go for the critical infrastructure that I think we should be prioritizing, roads and bridges and hard infrastructure. And unfortunately as well, only about half of that new money is actually paid for. The Congressional Budget Office reported that only about half of it, so about $250 billion or so, $260 billion would be added to the debt. So, you know, again, I think I would point back to how Tennessee does infrastructure. We pay as we go, and I think the federal government would be well advised to do that same thing and to avoid getting in a position where we're borrowing money from our children and grandchildren to pay for infrastructure. And on top of that, this $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill includes lots of extraneous requirements that increase the cost of infrastructure, that slow down the construction of those or the completion of those infrastructure projects, adding billions of dollars in unnecessary costs. And so there are no reforms. In fact, there are new hurdles that are put in place by this bill. So it doesn't pass the test for me of a pay-as-you-go plan that that prioritizes infrastructure in the way that I think we need to for the future of our state and the future of our country.
Looking ahead to the 2022 midterm elections, which are just over the horizon next year, President Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump, is very active already on the Republican side, endorsing candidates that he wants in the Republican Party to be their nominees. That includes Governor Bill Lee here in Tennessee for re-election. Governor Lee doesn't seem to have any major opposition at this point. I think you're running for re-election. I haven't seen any major opposition for you. Are you seeking Mr. Trump's endorsement?
Well, I want the voters of the 6th District of Tennessee to decide who should represent them. So I'll trust their judgment, and that's whose endorsement ultimately I would like to have.
So you're not seeking it, but you wouldn't turn it down if it's offered?
Well, it'd be hard to turn down the endorsement of a former president. That's true.
Do you expect the former president to run in 2024 to seek the Republican nomination for president again, or is it time for the party to move on to look at other people?
I don't know. I think that's a decision that he'll have to make, and certainly he remains very popular all across Tennessee. And so that'll be an interesting decision. I'm going to leave the speculation on that to the political pundits, though, I think.
What happened at the Capitol back on January 6th when the Congress was trying to certify the 2020 election that Joe Biden was elected in is continuing to be investigated. There have been a number of arrests made. There was a rather poorly attended rally on the Hill last weekend that claimed those who charged are being treated unfairly. What do you think?
Well, I do think that, first of all, I would say that it was unacceptable for people to break into the Capitol on January 6th, and those who did so should expect to be punished. Of course, they deserve the presumption of innocence that we afford to all Americans who are accused of wrongdoing and the protections of our justice system. And so, what I think that incident and the aftermath of it underscores is just the fraying of trust in American institutions. And so we want to see any crime punished, and certainly that's true for all of the criminal acts that have been committed over the last year to 18 months, and that includes those who came into the Capitol on January 6th.
The country continues to suffer under the coronavirus. We've now gone past more deaths than we saw during the Spanish flu epidemic, which was back in just over 100 years ago. To end this, is it time to mandate vaccinations so that we can bring this matter back under control and get our lives back again?
No, Pat, I don't think mandates are the answer. You know, there's a reason why Americans set up the form of government that we have. There's a reason why our forebears came here, and that was to escape tyrannical government. And so I think government mandates are really approaching this the wrong way. What we should do is we should embrace the American entrepreneurial spirit, the innovative power of Americans and American industry. And I think that's what we saw with President Trump's Project Warp Speed, which marshaled the resources of our scientists, not one, but three, actually multiple vaccines in less than a year, a remarkable accomplishment. At least one of those now has received full FDA approval. And so I think the vaccines provide the answer. Under the advice of my medical doctor, I have been vaccinated. I would encourage others, including all Tennesseans, to talk to their healthcare providers and with that consultation, make the decision on their own. But I think that the vaccines are the way that we ultimately can beat this virus. But we have to acknowledge that unfortunately, we've lost trust in our institutions. And so I would encourage the president to be undertaking initiatives that would restore trust in our basic institutions, restore trust in our healthcare officials, and provide, if you will, a carrot to encourage people to take advantage of the remarkable scientific advancements that we have. We didn't ask for this virus, but through American ingenuity, we've found the way to beat it.
We're not talking about booster shots. The FDA and the CDC have now come up with a plan to do that, and who's going to get it at least first, and that includes those over 65, those who have health conditions that make it important for them to get an extra shot, and also those healthcare workers and others that are in jobs that might put them at some risk regardless of their age. There was some controversy about that. Do you think these new guidelines are good ones, and should we be moving ahead on boosters?
Well, I hope so. And it was interesting to see that the Biden administration kind of got over its skis on this, indicating that they were going to have a broad booster shot program that was going to start, I believe, originally this week, though they said they were going to follow the science. And so then we saw the panel of healthcare experts reached the conclusion last week that that a broad booster shot program was not appropriate at this time and was not called for, and so they are in the process now of putting out more modest guidelines. And so, again, what I would stress is we're very fortunate in this country that through Project Warp Speed and the ingenuity of our healthcare companies, we have vaccine choices, and they're available to us. And so I hope that going forward, the administration can be a little more careful in terms of not getting ahead of where the science is, and helping to make sure that we guide the American people so that we restore trust in our basic healthcare institutions.
In the area of foreign policy, President Biden's gone through some difficult weeks, beginning with this chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. Some of your people in your party have called for him to resign. Is that a bit harsh, given that President Trump was also planning to withdraw from Afghanistan?
Well, I think what we see is the difference between a good plan and a well-executed plan. And so President Trump, I think, had the idea that we should end the war, that we should end our entanglement in Afghanistan. But we need to remember that that was a conditions-based plan, whereby we expected to see the Taliban and the Afghan people step up to the plate and take responsibility for their country and proceed in an orderly manner. Unfortunately, President Biden came in and imposed an arbitrary deadline. He wanted to be able to spike the football by the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and so he just was kind pursued this singular approach of getting us out of Afghanistan. We've seen what a debacle that turned out to be. And so, I would liken it to this. If you have a coach that took a team to the championship, went 12-0 last year, the coach and the assistant coaching staff has been changed, and now the new coach goes 0-12. That's not on the team, that's on the coaching staff. And so usually what happens is we either expect to see the coach fired or we expect the coach to fire the assistant coaches. And so I think that's where Biden is. No one can deny that this was a horrible withdrawal, retreat, whatever you want to call it, leaving Americans behind, leaving our allies behind, disrespecting our allies around the world that had come to help us beat back terrorism in Afghanistan, and abandoning over $80 billion, we're told, of taxpayer-funded military hardware, leaving the Taliban as one of the best armed groups in the world by the president's own estimation. And so I think I think the president has a lot to answer for there. His administration does, and I would, in the days ahead, like to see some explanations about how we did such a bad job withdrawing from Afghanistan.
Congressman John Rose is our guest on Inside Politics. Back with more with the Congressman after this break.